So let's talk about something that, for a lot of us, is both incredibly appealing and, honestly, a little bit scary. I'm talking about solitude. In a world that is just constantly buzzing with noise, the idea of being truly completely alone can feel, well, kind of weird. But what if that silence, that space, is actually one of the most powerful tools we have for becoming who we're meant to be?
And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Is being alone the secret to a fulfilling life, or is it a fast track to misery? We've all heard stories about great artists or thinkers who had their big breakthroughs in total isolation, but we also know, deep down, that loneliness can be one of the most painful human experiences. The truth is, it can be both, and it all comes down to how we approach it.
Okay, before we go any further, we have to get this distinction crystal clear. Solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. They're worlds apart. And the difference? It all comes down to one simple word: choice. Solitude is something you choose. It's a voluntary time out, a positive state where you get to connect with yourself. Loneliness, on the other hand, is that awful imposed feeling that you're missing a connection you desperately want. Seriously, understanding this difference is the key to everything we're about to talk about.
All right, so let's start with the good stuff. What happens when we intentionally, deliberately choose to spend time by ourselves? What kind of incredible benefits can we actually unlock? Let's dive in and explore the promise of solitude.
Think about it. When you finally step away from all the noise, all the expectations from other people, you create the space to actually hear your own thoughts. That's where real self-awareness starts to grow. It's also like the perfect incubator for creativity, right? It lets you tackle problems without a million interruptions. And in our always-on world, this time isn't a luxury. It's absolutely essential for just chilling out, reducing stress, and building up that emotional strength. It's in these quiet moments that we can finally step off the treadmill and ask ourselves, what do I really want? And get a much clearer sense of our purpose.
And look, this is not some new idea. If you look back through history, so many of the most creative minds in art and science, you name it, they actively sought out solitude. They just understood that to create something truly new, you first need that quiet space to connect with your own ideas, far away from the influence of the crowd.
But, and this is a big but, here's where it gets complicated. As amazing as solitude can be, there is a very real danger when it's not a conscious choice. So now we have to look at the other side of the coin, the peril of isolation.
So the whole thing hinges on your motivation. You have to ask yourself, why am I alone? If it's a deliberate choice for growth, for reflection, that's one thing. That's powerful. But if you're alone because you're running away from challenges, avoiding relationships, or just withdrawing from the world out of fear, well, that's when solitude stops being a friend and starts becoming something harmful. And the risks here are serious. Solitude that isn't chosen can quickly turn into chronic loneliness, which we know is linked to things like depression and anxiety. Instead of helping you grow, it can actually warp your sense of reality and stop your personal development in its tracks. We are social creatures, We have this fundamental need to belong, and unchecked isolation is a direct attack on that very need. So what we have here is this incredibly powerful tool that can lead to either amazing growth or some pretty significant harm. So how on earth do we navigate that? Well, the answer is all about finding the right balance. And that brings us to the art of intentional solitude.
This, right here, is the big takeaway. The real question isn't, is being alone good or bad? The question is, how are you using your alone time? The quality and the intention behind it are so much more important than the sheer quantity. 1 hour of mindful, purposeful solitude can do more for you than days of just aimless, unhappy isolation.
So how do we actually do it right? Well, it pretty much comes down to these 3 keys. First, you have to make it intentional. Don't just stumble into being alone. Choose it. See it as an opportunity, not an escape. Second, give that time a purpose. You don't need a super rigid schedule or anything, but have a general idea. Are you going to reflect, journal, work on a project, learn a new skill? And finally, and this one is so important, you have to balance it with connection. Fulfilling solitude doesn't replace your relationships, it actually makes them better. It lets you show up to your social life as a more recharged, more self-aware person. I really want to let this sink in for a second, because this one sentence sums up our entire journey today. True, fulfilling solitude isn't really about getting away from other people. It's about getting closer to yourself. It's about building an inner life that is so rich and so grounded that being by yourself becomes a pleasure, a source of incredible strength, and really the foundation for a truly authentic life.
And so that leaves us with one final, very personal question. Solitude is a powerful tool, and it's available to every single one of us. It can be a space for discovery, for creativity, for peace, but only if we choose to make it that way. So the only question that's left is this: how will you use it?